Tonight on NewsWatch, held hostage on the high seas. Pirates demand ransom for American Christians captured near Somalia.
Plus, chaos for Gaddafi. Hundreds are dead as Libya's leader claims he will fight protesters to the last bullet.
And Cinderella drives a stock car. A young man of faith becomes the unlikely winner of NASCAR's biggest event. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Somali pirates are holding 4 American missionaries hostage. Good evening, I'm Lee Webb.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. The pirates hijacked their yacht. Today marks their 3rd day in captivity. The missionaries were sailing the world distributing Bibles to remote areas. Here at home, members of their church are praying for their safety and quick release. Mark Martin has more in tonight's top story.
Our prayer tonight is for them, for their safety, for their families.
In California, churchgoers are praying for a quick return home of Jean and Scott Adam. The Adams have been sailing the world with a yacht full of Bibles since 2004.
Their feeling was that they had taken appropriate precautions, but overall they were fulfilling a dream. And when I asked if there's anything that anybody could do should something happen, her response was, well, just pray for us. We are fulfilling our dream.
That's our hope today, that these great people who are taking this holy word and giving it to so many people across this world, that they will somehow return and find safety and come back home.
Somali pirates hijacked the couple's yacht, Quest. 2 other Americans, Phyllis McKay and Bob Riggle of Washington State, are also on board. The ambush at sea took place in the dangerous waters nearly 300 miles off the Somali coast. An international warship is now actively tracking them as the hijacked yacht nears Somalia.
I think they're Americans, they must be rich, and so be able to pay whatever ransom is demanded. I think, however, these pirates have made a grave mistake.
The last time pirates targeted an American vessel was in 2009. The hijacking of the Maersk, Alabama ended with all but one of the pirates killed by U.S. Navy sharpshooters. Merchant Marine Captain Richard Phillips was held hostage in the ship's lifeboat for 4 days. He told CBN News how he endured the experience.
I didn't pray for escape. I prayed for strength and patience. I prayed for the strength. God will let me have the strength to continue and know when to escape, and the patience to wait for that time.
International warships now want to keep the pirates from making it to the Somali shore, where they and their hostages can easily disappear. Somalia is a lawless nation known for spawning pirates and radical Islamists.
There is no government in Somalia. When you don't have law enforcement, no police, no army, no intelligence in the community, this becomes a breeding ground.
The radical Islamic group Al-Shabaab rules much of Somalia. The group targets Christians, and some African missionaries caught working in the country have paid with their lives. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Hundreds are dead in Libya tonight after bloody clashes between anti-government protesters and Muammar Gaddafi's army. The U.S. State Department has ordered all non-emergency embassy personnel to leave the country. And as Jennifer Wishon reports, Gaddafi's government is warning bloodshed will escalate if protests continue.
Despite being fired on by their own military, protesters continue demonstrating, determined to force change after 40 years of Muammar Gaddafi's notorious reign. In an address, Gaddafi's son Sif says reform talks will begin in a matter of days, but warned Libya is not Egypt and continued demonstrations will lead to civil war. There will be bloodshed, he says. Rivers of blood will flow. Unrest in Libya and the Middle East is the main topic at the European Union summit meeting in Brussels.
Would you imagine to have an Islamic Arab Emirates at the borders of Europe? This would be a really serious threat, and that's why we consider Libya one of the areas to be taken into full consideration, wishing for peaceful reconciliation.
How much to interfere is a delicate balance leaders across the world are trying to strike.
This process can be hijacked. It can be hijacked by both outside and inside elements within any country.
President Obama is receiving briefs on the situation, and the White House is analyzing the speech delivered by Gaddafi's son to see if there are real possibilities for democratic changes. Libya is one of the largest oil producers in the world. Oil prices spiked after Saif Gaddafi warned Libya's oil wealth will be burned if the situation escalates into civil war. But to some demonstrators, it's worth the price. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck joins us now from Washington. Eric, what's the potential danger here if the protesters are successful and Gaddafi falls?
Well, Wendy, I think two things. Number one, who takes over after Gaddafi's gone? Is it radical Islamists in Libya? I think the other concern is the oil supply. Libya sits on a massive supply of oil. What happens to world oil prices if instability there increases? Look, Gaddafi is a horrible guy. He makes Hosni Mubarak in Egypt look like a pussycat, quite frankly. This is a guy who's engaged in terrorism against American interests, who's called for Israel to be wiped off the map, and who has been one of the most notorious dictators in the world for the past 40 years. But can it get even worse than him? Could it be radical Islamists taking over? I talked to a former Libyan terrorist last year, Wendy, exclusively here on CBN News, who told me that his group had struck a truce with the Gaddafi regime. With what's going on now, that truce may be off the table, and we could see radical Islamists come back to the fore in Libya.
Eric, I also want to ask you about something that happened in Egypt. On Friday, Youssef al-Qaradawi spoke to a massive cheering crowd in Tahrir Square. You've had time to look at his speech. Does anything stand out to you?
Well, Wendy, two things that stand out that have gone shamefully unreported, really, in the mainstream media. Number one, he talked about the reconquest, the Muslim reconquest of Jerusalem. Number two, he called on the Egyptian government to reopen the Rafah Crossing. Now, that's the crossing that leads into Gaza. Now, if you reopen that, it's been closed for a few years now. Israel and Egypt have worked on closing it. If you reopen it, you could funnel weapons in there, Iranian arms, into Gaza to the terrorist group Hamas to be used against Israel. Sheikh Qaradawi is a guy who wants to see Israel pushed into the sea. Over the years, he's made no bones about that. He's not a moderate, as he's been portrayed in some quarters.
But what kind of influence does he really have in the Muslim world?
Well, I think this could be a kind of Ayatollah Khomeini returns to Tehran kind of reemergence here for Qaradawi, Wendy. Look, he is the host of the most popular show on Al Jazeera, reaches millions and millions of households throughout the Middle East, is a respected religious authority in the eyes of Islamists, and also has appeal to many secular Muslims in the Middle East. If he rises to the forefront in Egypt, it's going to be a very dangerous situation. Remember, this guy is the spiritual leader of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood.
Definitely a man to watch. Eric Stakelbeck, thanks.
Thank you, Wendy.
The showdown over union rights in Wisconsin could end soon. There is talk tonight of a handful of Republicans there breaking with the new governor and forcing a compromise. But 14 Democratic senators are still hiding out in Illinois, blocking a vote. Here's Heather Sells.
The impasse in Wisconsin has captured national attention as it pits union rights against balancing the budget.
Democrat, Republican, all of us, this is important because we can't sustain this spending anymore. We can't.
Since the 90s, our salaries in Wisconsin, the average teacher salary has fallen all the way to 28th in the nation. We're below average.
Now there's talk that some Republican lawmakers may be open to compromise, even as their governor says he won't back down.
But again, we're broke. We got to balance the budget. And the only alternative is to say 5,500 state workers next budget could be laid off, 5,000 to 6,000 teachers and local government workers could be laid off. I don't want to lay anybody off, and I don't think that's a good alternative. So for us, we're going to stay on the side of saying, give them the tools, give them the modest opportunity for local governments as well as the state to balance their budget, and then we're going to stay firm on that.
Wisconsin Republicans say taking away collective bargaining rights is the only way to balance the budget. At stake, a $3.6 billion deficit. But Democrat lawmakers say no way, refusing to show up just to prevent a vote. Teachers have also come under criticism for walking off their jobs and shutting down schools by calling in sick. Students suspended for playing hooky might question the sight of doctors writing sick notes for protesters needing to explain their absence from work.
Do you think you could get in trouble?
Really good about where I am right now.
Certainly. We think it's worth the risk.
Talk of compromise is now in the air. One idea being floated: take away collective bargaining rights for 2 years and then restore them. The Republican-controlled assembly is expected to meet tomorrow. It needs one Democratic vote to take up the issue. Heather Sell, CBN News.
The Super Bowl of NASCAR racing is the Daytona 500. Some of racing's best drivers never get the chance to stand in its victory lane. Yesterday, a young Christian did it in only his second Sprint Cup race. Trevor Bayne was an unlikely winner. He turned 20 just a day before the race, and he's only a part-time driver in this series. His Wood Brothers team out of Virginia could only afford to run a few races this year. All that may change, though. This born-again believer told CBN sports reporter Sean Brown it was not luck that was on his side.
How does it know the Lord chose you to win today?
Man, God's just drawing us closer to Him in every experience, and that's what we prayed about before the race. Whether it was a good result or a bad result, we'd just be drawn closer. And He taught me something yesterday, you know, in that race. And you never know what His plan is, but I can guarantee if you stick with Him, He's going to have something good for you.
He just wants to give all the glory to God, you know, and let people know that, you know, this thing is great, you know, but God is greater. Being an NASCAR driver is great and all, but, you know, he's really in it, you know, to please the Lord. He's really trying to honor the Lord.
Good for him. Trevor says that every victory and every defeat is part of God's plan for his life. He plans on donating part of his winnings to Christian charities.
Coming up, a President's Day perspective from Lincoln to Kennedy, how the media have molded the images of America's leaders.
Attention investors, now is the time to protect your retirement accounts and investments. Excessive government spending is devaluing the U.S. dollar and high rates of inflation are coming. Gold has tripled since 2001, and some experts predict the prices will climb another 100%. Buy gold now, direct and wholesale with United Gold Group. The demand for gold around the world is higher than ever. Foreign countries like China and India are buying up gold at record rates. Why? What do they know that you don't?
Call now and get your Gold Investors Kit absolutely free. Call in the next 5 minutes and receive The Secret to Owning Gold in Your Retirement Account, also absolutely free. Just call 1-800-758-5070. That's 1-800-758-5070.
This could be the most important call you make this year. United Gold Group, investing in America's future.
Something going on at home? Don't go preacher on me, man.
I'm not going preacher.
I'm your friend.
A man without hope must accept the past.
I am alone. Been alone since I buried my first boy.
And let faith guide him.
What is there to believe in?
You can never underestimate the power of grace.
This Friday, witness the power of forgiveness.
Are we in this together, man?
The Grace Card, rated PG-13, starts Friday.
If you're an individual group or business needing a dental plan, Avia Dental offers group plans for as little as $5 per month. Now members of your group can save up to 50% or more off a high-quality dental care. Everyone qualifies, and there's no waiting or limits on visits to the dentist. Visit aviadental.com or call 1-888-431-CARE. Avia Dental since 1994. Smile, you're with people who care.
Blizzard conditions today in the upper Midwest grounded hundreds of flights. Parts of Minnesota saw up to 15 inches of snow. Passengers at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport were stranded as the Twin Cities saw whiteout conditions. Wisconsin was blanketed with 12 inches of snow. The storm is moving east. Winter storm warnings are now in effect for New York City, Philadelphia, and Rhode Island.
Well, it looked like the planes were still moving, though, in Minneapolis. Early rumblings are underway in the 2012 race for the White House. Probable presidential hopeful Tim Pawlenty is in Nevada today. The former Minnesota governor is meeting with the state's GOP operatives. Nevada is an early presidential primary state. Pawlenty has been hinting for months that he will make a run for the White House. Pawlenty recently wowed conservatives at the CPAC conference in Washington by taking a tough stance against President Obama and saying he should stop apologizing for the country.
Well, today is President's Day, and a new poll out shows Ronald Reagan as the nation's greatest chief executive. Abraham Lincoln came in second, followed by Bill Clinton, John F. Kennedy, and George Washington, our first president. President Obama holds the 7th spot. George W. Bush and Thomas Jefferson tied for 10th. Gallup says Americans tend to mention more recent presidents in the poll because they held office during their lifetime. That makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, Jane Hampton Cook fell in love with the history of the U.S. presidency when she worked in the White House for George W. Bush.
Yeah, now she's turned that passion into literature with her latest children's book coming out this President's Day. Paul Strand has her story.
Jane Hampton Cook wants kids to be fascinated with our history and our presidents. In her new book, What Does the President Look Like?, Jane ties the evolution of image capturing to how Americans have come to see their presidents.
We're used to seeing images of our president every day, and even our first president on the dollar bill all the time. But imagine being alive in his time. Unless you met him in real life or saw him in portraits like these, you'd have no idea what your president looked like.
We found Jane at this church school in Vienna, Virginia, reading her new book and talking about the presidents with some kids there, including two of her boys.
So Austin, you can wear this hat.
It wasn't until Abe Lincoln that Americans began to see the actual real image of their president. Abe thought it was crucial to get out a photo of himself because opponents had made him look like such a backwoods buffoon in cartoons.
Matthew Brady took a photograph of him, and that really dignified Lincoln's image. He said to Matthew Brady at the inaugural ball, "You helped elect me president."
Jane told the kids why it was ironic that Silent Cal Coolidge had that nickname in that particular era of films.
Back in the 1920s, there was no sound at the movies. You couldn't hear anything. You could only see the pictures. And so it fit that the newsreels of Calvin Coolidge were silent, and his nickname was Silent Cal.
There's some humor, too, about FDR being the first president on TV.
He was the first president to go on television, but there were only 200 television sets in the entire country, and I think they were all in New York. So not very many people saw him. It wasn't in widespread use. It was a novelty.
But by the 1960 John Kennedy-Richard Nixon debate, the TV image had become an absolutely crucial factor in politics.
People who watched it on television thought Kennedy won because his whole persona came across so much better on television. But people who heard the broadcast on radio and didn't see it thought that Nixon's answers were better. So it really did make a big difference in that election.
The presidency, sometimes the image, is as important as the reality. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, could we be seeing the dawning of a new age in Washington? See what's causing members of both parties to cross the aisle.
The doctor said to me, "Peggy, you don't understand. Pancreatic cancer is inoperable and incurable." And he says, "Well, Peggy, you've got 2 months to live." It was like he was telling me, go to the store. There was no compassion. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. My life was an hourglass. I was home, laying on the couch, just dying. My sister Pam called the Cancer Treatment Centers of America. When I got there, I knew that I was going to be cared for. I met with the doctor after the tests were done and said, "How long do I have?" And he looked at me and he said, "Peggy, we did a lot of tests on you, and I never saw one thing stamped on the bottom of your foot that said you were going to die in 2 months. You have no expiration date." I thought, wow.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is unlike any other cancer hospital, full of hope, committed to your fight. We use every weapon: surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, nutrition, spiritual support, and mind-body medicine. We surround you with a real team, working together, all under one roof.
Each time I went back to the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, I responded better. My tumors are shrinking. Came back in September again, and they still couldn't see anything. I said, "You're kidding me." We'll see how it goes. We'll keep testing, but we can't see the tumors anymore.
Please call the number on your screen to speak with an oncology information specialist and receive a life-changing information kit and DVD packed with valuable information. Call now and learn about treatment options you may not even know exist.
It's really unbelievable how one doctor can tell me I have 2 months to live. And then I go to the Cancer Treatment Centers of America and they save my life. Hope is a mainstay. Hope is everything.
Don't give up. Your fight is our fight. Call Cancer Treatment Centers of America today.
Former Presidents Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush are joining forces to chair a national new civility center. The National Institute for Civil Discourse, as it's called, opened today at the University of Arizona in Tucson. It's in response to the shooting of Representative Gabrielle Giffords in January. The center is a nonpartisan initiative aimed at spurring debate, research, and policy about civility in public discourse. And living up to that call for civility in politics has not been easy.
But one Republican and one Democrat say they found a way to make it work. David Brody explains in tonight's Focus Report.
After Tucson, there were moments of silence. Tears on the House floor.
Our hearts are broken, but our spirit is not.
And a bipartisan call for civility, which led to the symbolic gesture of Democrats and Republicans sitting together at the President's State of the Union address.
We want to change the tone and show the public that we can work together.
And it was civil.
What comes of this moment is up to us. What comes of this moment will be determined not by whether we can sit together tonight, but whether we can work together tomorrow. And I believe we must. That's what the people who sent us here expect of us.
A month later, though, there are skeptics.
The tone has been changed as a result of Tucson, at least temporarily, and we don't know how long that will last.
The parties have become more ideological. Remember, there used to be liberal Republicans and there were conservative Democrats from the South. Now the Republican Party is ideologically uniformly conservative, and the Democratic Party is almost uniformly liberal. And when you have that ideological difference, they're going to clash more than they did in the past.
The president promised more cooperation with Republicans. And while they have been meeting together,
We had a very nice lunch with the president and vice president.
The differences are obvious.
I guess the particulars and the details will be where the disagreements may lie.
Remember the battle over health care? Well, it's not over. And the debate over cutting spending, that's not going to be easy either.
The political industry, which is now a real industry in a way that it wasn't 20 years ago, is geared only for combat. It is not geared for compromise, cooperation, or anything else.
Don't tell that to these two congressmen who recently joined me on the Brody File.
We shouldn't buy the world's idea that prayer is the last resort. Well, I guess all we can do is pray about it, but it should be the first resort.
Democrat Mike Mcintyre and Republican Randy Forbes lead the Congressional Prayer Caucus. That's helped them develop a close friendship despite their political differences.
Mike and I may disagree on issues, but you would never find a situation where I would say anything bad about Mike, or I don't think him say anything bad about me.
They say prayer could be what other members of Congress need to share in order to come together.
A lot of times someone will engage me and they can talk for 45 minutes. They're so fired up or upset about, or passionate about an idea, and then I'll say, well, would you take 5 minutes to pray about it? And I've never had anybody say no, they wouldn't. Usually they kind of pause a minute like, really? And I say, yeah, I mean, do you know there is a prayer caucus and that we do seek wisdom? And obviously if you're that passionate about helping your country or wanting us to make the right decisions about things, will you join us in prayer about it?
The prayer caucus comes together here on Capitol Hill before votes each week, and it's growing. It's standing room only in there, both Republicans and Democrats. Now, prayer may not be the first thing that all of these members of Congress think about, but it's clear that they're doing something right, and it could lead to a model for others in this quest for civility. Mark DeMoss, an influential figure within evangelical circles, says Christians play a vital role.
I think as people that identify ourselves as followers of Christ, we have even a greater responsibility to behave a certain way.
What is the role of Christians that are listening to a conversation like this? Because the vitriol, honestly, it also does come from some conservative, moderate Christians.
You may disagree with them philosophically on an issue, but please remember that God also created them, and you ultimately hope that their heart and mind, will come to a realization that in their faith they can deal with this issue. And whether they come to the same conclusion or not, that's ultimately up to them.
You can sometimes disagree with someone without really vilifying that person. And we're not perfect in that. I mean, Mike takes a lot of hits from his party. I take hits from my party because of our relationship. But yet we think it's so important that we do that for Congress and hopefully changing that tone, but also for the country.
There you have it, civility in progress, and something for the White House and congressional leadership to think about. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, why the personal journey for one of our own reporters is getting him some national attention.
The doctor said to me, Peggy, you don't understand. Pancreatic cancer is inoperable and incurable. And he says, well, Peggy, you've got 2 months to live. It was like he was telling me, go to the store. There was no compassion. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. My life was an hourglass. I was home, laying on the couch, just dying. My sister Pam called the Cancer Treatment Centers of America. When I got there, I knew that I was going to be cared for. I met with the doctor after the tests were done and said, how long do I have? And he looked at me and he said, Peggy, we did a lot of tests on you, and I never saw one thing stamped on the bottom of your foot that said you were going to die in 2 months. You have no expiration date. I thought, wow.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is unlike any other cancer hospital, full of hope, committed to your fight. We use every weapon: surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, nutrition, spiritual support, and mind-body medicine. We surround you with a real team, working together, all under one roof.
Each time I went back to the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, I responded better. My tumors were shrinking. Came back in September again, and they still couldn't see anything. I said, you're kidding me. We'll see how it goes. We'll keep testing, but we can't see the tumors anymore.
Please call the number on your screen to speak with an oncology information specialist and receive a life-changing information kit and DVD packed with valuable information. Call now and learn about treatment options you may not even know exist.
It's really unbelievable how one doctor can tell me I have 2 months to live. And then I go to the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and they saved my life. Hope is a mainstay. Hope is everything.
Don't give up. Your fight is our fight. Call Cancer Treatment Centers of America today.
About 22 million American children are growing up in single-parent homes.
And in most cases, the missing parent is the father. That missing piece sent one of our own reporters, Ephraim Graham, on a personal journey to find his dad. And it will be featured on the Oprah Winfrey Network tonight in a show called Searching For. Here's a preview.
Tell me about your father. What's the story?
I know so little in my mind. I remember getting a phone call, and he said, "Hi, this is your dad. I'm going to come to meet you. And we'll probably go, if I remember correctly, to Coney Island." I didn't know what Coney Island was, but I knew there would be rides, and it was supposed to be fun.
And you're 5 at this time.
5.
Okay.
He never came, saying that we saw each other 10 times.
Ephraim tells us he decided to share his story in hopes of inspiring others.
And you can see it tonight on the Oprah Winfrey Network. We will all be watching, and there is not a finer gentleman that we work with than Ephraim Graham. We think the world of him.
That's right. Well, that's all for this edition of NewsWatch.
Good night.